All eyes are now on the great state of Georgia as two runoff elections are going to determine control of the U.S. Senate. Republicans Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue are going to be facing their well-funded Democratic challengers one more time in a runoff election. When I was in Arkansas earlier this week, I talked with Senator David Perdue, who's been called by his challenger, Jon Ossoff, Trumpism in a nutshell. Here's my interview with Senator David Perdue. Senator, let's just get right to the sort of meat of the nut here. If you don't win this race, Chuck Schumer could end up being the majority leader. What does that mean to people who don't live in Georgia?
What Schumer has said is he'll do away with the filibuster rule, and that will allow him to do anything he wants with 51 votes. 50 plus the vice president, they have the tiebreaker. He can stack the court. He can add 4 new seats with 2 new states. And he can fool around with the Electoral College. So what that means to everybody around the country is they can execute this liberal agenda that we heard perpetrated during the presidential election. You know, they want things as elaborate as the Green New Deal, open borders, defund the police, socialized medicine, cut the military. I mean, this is a program that they could never do if they have to negotiate with a minority party.
It's like a hurricane is taking place in Georgia with the money from all over America coming in for this race. I mean, literally tens and tens of millions of dollars. But then there's something else. People like Andrew Yang, former Democrat presidential candidate, said that he and his wife are moving to Georgia so they can vote. How does that work? Is it legal just to move to Georgia, show up and say, okay, I'm going to live here for the next 6 weeks and vote in that Senate race?
Well, we have a lenient registration law here. You've heard Stacey Abrams and others accuse Georgia of having voter suppression for the last few years. There's nothing further from the truth. We have automatic voter registration here. But if you're moving into the state before December 7th, you can register to vote and vote in the runoff, even though you did not vote in the general or the primary. And so what some Democrats are doing is coming in with, in some cases, valid addresses. But we have a law that says you have to have an intent to be a resident of Georgia. You can't just come in and vote. However, we know there are many people who are registered and already voted in other states in the general election are doing this to come into Georgia now and register just to vote in our runoff. We're encouraging the Secretary of State to get at this with these county election boards to make sure this doesn't happen.
Well, I think one antidote to that is to get the governor to call a special session and say that anyone who moves in just to vote pays a 50% income tax on anything they made last year to the state of Georgia. Budget problems resolved, and they probably move away pretty quickly after that. Another big issue is that you and also Senator Kelly Loeffler, the 2 senators from Georgia, both in the runoff on January the 5th, surprisingly and rather shockingly, call for the resignation of the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia over the problems that you've had with ballot just validating. Explain why you felt like that the Secretary of State had kind of botched this thing and needed to resign.
Well, as a business guy with a 40-year business career, and Kelly Loeffler, same thing, she's got a strong business background. We together talked about the litany of incompetence here going back to the primary in June 9th, where fundamentally we caved into turning into a state, the vote by mail state, just because a few Democrats wanted to do that. We felt like that we couldn't get straight answers around the general election. And this had nothing to do with President Trump. It basically was an attempt to try to get them to start moving in the right direction. And this was a way to put some pressure on. We just felt it was the right thing to do.
Any indication, will he resign?
Well, I don't know that, Mike, but I tell you what, this week he's already moved to do a hand recount of the presidential ballot. And so that is a step that he unilaterally made. I applaud that. We need to have more clarity and more control over these counties. For example, in Fulton County, they were supposed to start counting absentee ballots before the end of Tuesday, Election Day, and they did not do that. And so it raises questions about how many absentee ballots showed up after the close of the polls on Tuesday.
I want to talk about your opponent, Jon Ossoff. Somebody has said that he has set a new national record in burning through the most money of any candidate in history not to have won. But let's talk about, more importantly, not so much the campaign tactics, but philosophically, where do you and he differ significantly? What's the main difference between you?
Well, it's very simple. He's a socialist. He believes in the Green New Deal. He believes in this full Democratic agenda. He will be a rubber stamp for Chuck Schumer. All Chuck Schumer wants is the 49th and 50th vote. He has to come through Georgia to get that. But if he gets that, it's not about Jon Ossoff or Raphael Warnock. It's really about simply having enough votes so Schumer can do exactly what he wants. And let me warn the viewers, Mike, you hear some Democrats say, well, don't worry about that. I'm not going to vote for the Green New Deal. And don't you believe it? I have watched these guys for 6 years. Chuck Schumer will line them up like iron pellets to a magnet. They will do exactly what Chuck Schumer says, particularly on these heavy items like defunding the military and defunding the police, cutting the military, and the Green New Deal. This is insanity on a new level. They think they've gotten away with it if they pull out the wins here in Georgia. They believe they can get total control and they don't have to negotiate with us to determine the direction of the country.
That's why we're all watching this race and why we're so delighted to have you here. Senator David Perdue, thank you, and go get them.
Thanks, Mike. God bless you.
You can learn more about the senator at PerdueSenate.com. Also, if you want to contribute to his campaign, I'm sure he'd like that a bunch. That'll help keep the Senate out of Chuck Schumer's clutches. And if you want to keep up with the senator in real time, you can follow him on social media at Senator David Perdue.